monomyth. And then there's the argument that the more successful the story, the more of those elements it has. So if you want to have a good story that people will like, take this guide, the monomyth, and build your story around that. Well, one of his students was George Lucas, right? Who basically took his teacher's word for it and made up a crappy story based on the monomyth, tried to map it out exactly based on Luke Skywalker, and made a movie, a really crappy, cheap movie that basically shook the foundations of filmmaking, because that became the template. If you want a movie that will make millions, even billions, I guess, today, because like Dr. Evil, $1 million, no, billion, oh, $1 billion. You have to follow the monomyth. And boy, I love asking, questions, follow the monomyth. How many movies are out there that don't follow it, that you know of, and most people can't, well, but of course it could be our pattern recognition that we see this as basically a pattern in all of those things. But George Lucas did refer to Joseph Campbell as my Yoda, so that's historically a quote. So that's kind of interesting. Then we have still another approach, and Viktor Frankl is, and this is where we get logotherapy or meaning therapy, that the way you can help people that are ill is by talking with them about meaning, the meaning of life, and trying to give them a sense of meaning, because without some sort of sense of meaning, you don't have a narrative within which you have your values and why you get up, and you need that story in order for you to have all the benefits of a human life. So of course that leads to the idea that narration frames the way we view things. And the real big one was the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is actually linguistic relativity. And this is pretty much where we are. This has come in and out of vogue, but the idea is that there's roughly 7,000 languages. We think we've already talked about this. And if you think of languages as your operating system, so to speak, if you think of this, your head as your neck top, and what language is it operating in? Is it iOS, MS-DOS, what? It's English 301, or whatever, because there's all different varieties. This was, by the way, part of the topic that we just talked in our UAA undergraduate philosophy conference. It was not just philosophy, it was languages as well, and history, I believe. So everyone participated in it from the arts side. And big issue, though, was AI, artificial intelligence, and language. How do they fit together? Truth seems to be a particular idea based on Greek grammar. So we how do we know the truth? Well, depending on your culture, depending on your language, it might not even be a category truth. That's kind of a cultural thing to be thinking about that. Okay. So what happens basically is Kant stimulates a lot of new activity in the test. So we're working on test 3 now, right? Notice question 1 is how does Hume argue that metaphysics is not possible? You can certainly respond to that by using Kant's explanation, that basically we can't have a synthetic a priori. Remember, you need 300 words, though. Add some extra words. Talk about fishing or something. I don't know. But then, question 2, I say, well, how does Kant's response to Hume start modern psychology? And what I mean, what I'm thinking of there is all of these offshoots, these explanations of trying to figure out how is it that our human minds structure our experience. Notice that they're all accepting the idea that you really can't see the thing in itself as it is in itself and correct your that's a human current educated person's belief right now. We're all Kantians at least, but which branch of Kant and the responses to it do you follow, right? But so there's lots of different kinds of psychology out there. They all seem to be trying to figure out what structures a sane mind. Especially when what we've discovered is there are a lot of insane people. What went wrong with them? Was their mother not very loving? Was their father a brute? Did they not have a mother or father? Did they eat a lot of lead paint? Like Christopher, was the mother on alcohol during the fetal gestation, whatever. Please avoid alcohol. It's a personal. It's so horrible to have a young person growing up, and you will know ahead of time that this person is not going to be able to fulfill the life of a real person because they don't have the mental ability to become an actual person the way we expect. And yet there they are, right? So Kant, how did all the response, all his response to Hume start modern psychology? But then we're going to move on to Hegel, because the next generation is going to be working with this problem. So you get Gottlob Fichte was the earlier one, but Hegel and his two roommates in Tübingen University, Friedrich Schelling and the poet Heinlein, not Heinlein. Heinlein's the science fiction writer. Hölderlin, sorry. I think another Friedrich Hölderlin. But in any case, looking at Hegel, he's my hero, my philosophical hero, because when I was in college, I was feeling like George Foreman after a while. Each of these new philosophers punched me and knocked me down onto the mat, because I kept thinking, Plato has the answer. No, Aristotle's clearly right. No, Aristotle's, Kant, Hume, these folks all really, I took it so seriously that it really shook me, right? And by the time I got to Kant, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. At least, sane humans have enough going, that if we grow up right in the right environment with the right culture, we definitely know for sure what's right and what's wrong. Important part of Kant when I frame, the cognitive map that I did the one time. If you remember, I put Kant up at the top, where you get certainty, right? If you're looking for certainty, you want, it's a deontology, so duty is my primary concern. And you can see deontology in other things, particular religions, for example, will say, God said it, I believe it, and that settles it, right? That's a deontological point of view. But Kant gives us a sense of certitude, because he says if you're raised correctly and you're a sane person, when you see a triangle, you know it's a triangle. You have no doubt that it's a triangle, and that's a square. You might pronounce it square, but that's still a square. You know what a square is. That's a triangle, quadrahedron, pentahexagon, all those different ones. That could have been funny, but no. Okay. But what about if I'm driving along and traffic is all bollocksed up? We're all stopped. Don't know why. It doesn't really happen very often here. But if you've been in like Detroit, it's kind of a routine event, right? So you're stuck in traffic, and of course people are coming home. It's getting dark. It's everybody's tired from work, and nerves are frayed. And you see the person sitting in the car next to you, beautiful young woman, sitting in the car next to you. But the car behind her is loaded with a bunch of ugly guys. And for some reason, those ugly guys are totally pissed off at the beautiful woman sitting in the car just in front of them, next to you, right? And since traffic isn't going, they actually get out of their car and come over, and they start pounding on her car, trying to get to her. I have a quiz question for you. What's your obligation at that point? Should you get out of your car and try to stop them, interfere somehow, protect her? What's your obligation in that situation? Kind of a follow-up question. What do you think you should do? What would you actually do? But what do you think you should do? Are they different? And in fact, if you're right, you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I should get out and I should stop them. That's what I should do. Ethically, I should do that. But you know what? I don't want to get beat up. I'm hungry. I'm tired. It's their issue. You'll excuse yourself out of what you ethically, what Kant would call a categorical imperative. The moral categorical imperative for you is to interfere, to protect this person, right? But the hardest thing to do is often what we know to be right. Our duty is clear, just as clear as the triangle. That's a triangle. I should interfere, right? But I won't. Why? It's none of my business. Well, socially it is, right? And you can get in all that dilemma. And in fact, what happened was nobody did get out of their cars. She eventually ran for it, and they chased her. I think they even beat her up a little bit, but she finally ended up jumping over. There was a bridge nearby, and she jumped off the bridge and drowned. This is one of those stories, where everybody in all the other cars is a crowded, situation, and everybody else just watched as these guys did this. So it's one of those psychological dilemmas. It happened in Detroit.
Did they have a reason to mad at her? Or they just were like, "Oh my God, you're not going fast."
I think it was something to do with, a bump or something with the cars or something.
Oh.
But still, that's not a reason to get so physically violent with somebody. But you've heard about this kind of psychological situation before. We've had it happen here in Anchorage. There was one Saturday afternoon where a guy was sitting there with a big kitchen knife, stabbing a person on the pavement, right by the Pennies. It used to be, is it still a Pennies? I don't know. He was sitting there just stabbing, and a couple hundred people are all around just staring at this, wondering, what the heck, you know? Finally, one person pulled up, got a shotgun out of the back of his car, came over to the guy and said, "Stop it!" And he wouldn't stop, so he shot him. He still kept stabbing him, so he shot him again. He shot him 3 times before he finally stopped. The guy with the shotgun was arrested for firing a shotgun in the urban environment.
This is why people don't stop anymore.
There was a big crowd of people that all complained about it, and they canceled the charge against the guy. That happened in Anchorage. But yeah, everybody's just standing there shocked, not doing anything about a situation.
When did that happen?
I'd have to. Since I've been here, that happened since '87, but I'm not sure exactly what year it happened. It was down on the street. Penny turned out to be his roommate. They were having an argument. The roommate died. Probably was dead long before anybody did anything, actually. And they were mentally ill, at least the one with the knife. Yes.
Do you think that people didn't do anything because they were in shock? Like they just couldn't comprehend, like.
Well,
so much